What we're going to do is start a rotary file. This is CNC Shark Rotary Part 2. First thing you do is start a new file. You just come in File, New. And normally when it comes up, it'll come up like this. If you haven't done a rotary file before, if you're like me, normally doing a single-sided versus a double-sided, it comes up this way. So we're going to come down from single-sided and click this one, rotary. And if you notice, this instantly changes from a flat board to a rod. The shape of my rod, or length of my rod, is 8.5 inches long. And the diameter of that rod is 0.5. Because I'm making a pegs and joker peg to go in the holes. Our axis is going to be center, or the 0 is going to be the center of the axis. The datum point is going to be the left corner. If you're watching the screen to your right, you will see it jump down to this corner down here. And we're going to be along the x-axis. What I did is, as you saw in part 1, is I laid my axis. If this is my machine, the bed of my machine, this is my x, and the y goes this way. So on the front of my table, I mounted my rotary axis, and I did that on purpose because it only really takes about 3 or 4 inches off my bed area that I can work in. I've got a 50-inch table, so I'll leave this set up, and then I don't have to put it on and take it off all the time. And that what lets me work on objects up to 48 inches in this area. So that's why I did it that way. It's also, what I'm working on is a very short. I originally tried to make it 17 inches wide, which is all this, and what happened is it kept breaking. And it kept breaking because I'm machining it down to 0.25 inch in diameter rod, and it flexes too much, so it breaks. Alright, so there it is. Well, what is that? Well, this is 8.5 inches long this way, and if you take a 0.5 inch rod and unwrap it, that's the length you will have. So that is my Y direction, but it wraps around my rod. If you look in 3D view, there's nothing there, but there will be shortly. Let me show you. First thing I have to do is figure out, if I go up here to gadgets, click on that, come down to wrapping, see it? Right here where it says creating a rounded toolpath. I click on that. This is the size of my blank, and I'll show you some pictures at the end of this video, integrate them in so that you can see what I'm working with. My blank is a square, and I cut it on my table saw, and I took a 3/4 by 3/4 and brought it down to a 0.6 by 0.6. So I've got a square blank, ran it through my table saw. Now I'm going to put it in my CNC and make a round rod out of it. You notice this blank size is always a little bit bigger than the size of the finished rod that I want. If it's not larger, what happens is I get flat spots on the sides where it's smaller. So this works for me, 0.6. So I've got a 0.6, and originally the first one I did it this way. It took me 3 hours to turn down 17-inch rod. So I said, no, that's not going to work for me. But I want you to try it. We're going to start right here because this is the one I learned that works best for me. So this is the one we're going to do first. I want you to do this one and this one before you go to part 3 video. So that way you can look at 3 different techniques in getting this down to size. And let me know which one you like best. I like this one. I haven't tried this one yet. This one took so long that I thought I was going to die before it was done. It took 3 hours, like I said. Now the next step, after you've selected one of these 3, is then to select the toolpath. And the toolpath that I started with was an 8-inch end mill. And that's one of the ones that took so long, but we're going to do 1/4 inch. We're not going to mess with any of this here. We're going to do that later in the program. So we select that. Then I come down, and it's hiding down here under the OK. So I've learned to press here on this surface. So I deselect that. See, instead of selecting that, I close it. It's still selected if you notice the box. But when I select here, that turns off. That allows me to push my enter key and makes it create a toolpath for us. And there's our toolpath. So I'm going to click on that toolpath, and I'm going to come in here and edit some things. I'm going to leave the speed at 80, but I'm going to change my plunge rate down to 25. Plunge rate is how fast this comes into the piece of wood. And 40 is too fast. It actually bends or flexes the wood before it engages. It pushes down on it, and then the wood snaps back into that bit, and sometimes it breaks it. That's the problem I was having before. My pass depth, I'm going to change to 0.1 to lower that down a little bit, and I am going to make my step over 0.1 to increase how many times, or decreases the number of passes it takes, increases my cut and my chip load. But that's okay. So I'm going to select OK, and then I come over here and hit apply. And believe it or not, we're done. We have to save it, of course, but let's preview it so you can see what it looks like. We're going to hit preview. Now I'm going to slow it down first so we can look at it, and hit preview visible toolpath. What it's done, remember this is my Y path, but my Y doesn't move. What moves in this direction anyway, my Y axis is now my rotary axis. So this turns 1/10 of an inch each time that this goes from one end to the other. Every time it goes, it stops. The Y-axis rotates 1/10 of an inch, then it goes back. And this is going back at 80 inches per minute. It'd be nice if it was per second, but it's not. And then it comes across, back. And this takes about 10 minutes to do. I'll speed it up now so you can see the finished product. If I boost that up, you can see there it is. And that's what I want you to do. That's first project for you. Make a rod. And the next step, of course, for CNC Shark users is to click this box, hit save, and you locate this toolpath. I'm going to stay below it so I can highlight the one above. This is the one we're going to use, but it's easier to read if I stay below it. CNC Shark rotary, wrap the Y in inches, and orient on the X-axis. So that's what we want. We're wrapping the Y and going across, traveling across the X-axis, and the Z is coming up and down. So that's the one we want. We selected it, and then we tell it to save. And we save it to our removable disk. And we're going to call it Rounding Toolpath Raster. S-G-E-R. And that's going to work good. Save it. And go out on a machine and look at video 1 so you know how to hook it up. Put that rod in there, 0.6 in diameter, and it will machine a rod that looks like it's not quite round, which is okay. As you see, what happens is, as it comes through and machines each time, there's a flat spot. See them right there? Those flat spots are going to be shown on the rod, and that's okay for my application, because what I'm making doesn't require a perfectly rounded rod. If you require a perfectly rounded rod, do the one that we talked about first. This one. This will give you a perfectly round rod, but it takes forever to get there. So my suggestion to you, spend 79 cents and buy one, because it's quicker to do that if all you're trying to do is make a round rod. Just go buy yourself a round rod. But what I'm doing is making a round rod so that I can, or a roundish rod, so that I can then make some pegs, and I'll show you that at the end of the video. So we'll close that. That's our finished product. We're done. We'll do a file save, attempt 1, and then make another file, or I'm not going to do it because that's your homework. Make another file using this technique, and then make another file using this technique, and decide which one you like best. Have fun with your CNC, do your homework, and then come back to part 3. Thank you, and have a good day. Okay, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make a peg to fit in this hole. I started off making a really round one with a little notch in it, all that stuff. Well, that didn't work. Not for me. It just took too much time. So what I ended up with, this is what I'm looking for, as a little peg. And if you notice, when I turn it, the light hits those little lines going across. So it's not perfectly round. That's what I was telling you the raster does. So this is what I've ended up making. A nice little peg that fits in that hole right there. What your assignment is this week, because that's what we're going to cover next week, is how do I get from, this week we covered, how do I get from a square rod, like this, to a round rod, like this. All right. This was the first circular cut technique that I showed you, and you notice this one broke right in the middle. That's because the rod was 17 inches long, and I was a little more aggressive on the cut than I needed to be, and the vibration built up and it snapped off. So you're going to make a rod that looks like this when you do the round one, and it'll look like this when you're doing, see the little slats on there? So that's the kind you'll end up with, except it'll be uniform from one end to the other. And this one, if you look, I'm going to show you in the next video, part 3, is how do I cut that out of there? How do I shrink that piece down, and how do I lay those out so that it works for me? So we'll cover that in video 3. So your homework assignment is to make 3 rods. One like this, one like this with the raster on it, and another one with a raster on it. There's 2 raster setups there. So try those 3, and then come back and see me in video 3.